Tarry here, where the stories never grow old, and you hear something new every time they are told, and it comes clear. So tarry here, where it doesn't matter your age, and when we gather round the table, we all take the stage year after year. So tarry here.
Welcome to the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org. I'm Fanny Crawford.
And I am Stosh Sielkowski.
Today is Monday, February 17th, and we are celebrating Valentine's Day. A bit belated, but it's never too late for Valentine's Day.
That's true. And it's been around a long time.
Oh, are you going to tell us about that?
Well, I thought I'd mention about, it's named after Saint Valentine. It is a religious feast day. Catholic, Anglican, and Lutheran churches celebrate it on different days. July 6th and July 30th for the Eastern Orthodox, and of course July 14th here in the United States. And Saint Valentine was a special person. Unfortunately, he was killed. He was murdered, and at least two different Saint Valentines are mentioned in early martyrologies. Saint Valentine of Rome, along with Saint Valentine of Terni, Terni. The two abstracts of the acts of the two saints were in nearly every church and monastery of Europe, according to Professor Jack B. Ulrich of the University of Kansas. St. Valentine is commemorated in the Anglican Communion and the Lutheran churches. The Eastern Orthodox Church is recognized on July 6th. In addition, the Eastern Orthodox Church observes the feast of Hero Martyr Valentine, Bishop of Interrama, on July 30th. In 1969, the Catholic Church removed his name from the general Roman calendar, leaving his liturgical celebration to local calendars. Though use of the pre-1970 liturgical calendar is also authorized under the conditions indicated in the Summorum Pontificum of 2007. The Catholic Church continues to recognize him as a saint, listing him as such in the February 14th entry in the Roman Martyrology. The official liturgical calendar for the Diocese of the United States identifies February 14th as the memorial of Saints Cyril and Methodius as well. Amazing. The Catholic Church has lots of saints. I think they have something, I'm not sure. I don't want to misrepresent it, and I don't want to sound disparaging, but I think they have 20,000 saints. Do you think that's possible?
Literally 20,000?
I think so. I think I read that, and that might be only 2,000, but either way, it's an enormous amount of sainted people. And, and I was raised Catholic, so, it's kind of like home base to me, but it is a different kind of thing. So, and I find it interesting. Valentine's Day, we celebrate it as for romance and love and stuff like that, and it's a really sweet thing. But in that way, however, it's based on the fact on a man who was murdered. Who did good works, but then he was murdered and sainted. It's amazing. It seems like that was the best way to become a saint in the Catholic Church. Get yourself murdered, and they'll make you a saint. But I would choose not to be. I'd rather stay alive and be the sinner.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk briefly to thank Andy Offit-Irwin for opening our show with Tarry Here, and to say that I'm thrilled that Andy will be coming in July to Stories in the Round.
Oh boy.
But we start the Stories in the Round season in March, and I will be the first teller to open the season on March 24th. And then in April, Jessica Piscatelli Robinson will be coming as our second teller to do a stint story event with us. And I think that's the 28th, if I have my dates correct. So 4th. It's generally the 4th Monday of the month, but I'm pretty sure the date's the 28th.
Good.
And I hope you can come to see both of us.
I'm looking forward to it. I haven't been traveling much lately, but I will be soon. I keep wanting to get in the car and go to a party that I've been invited to. We've been invited to, my wife and I.
Heard about that party.
That party keeps putting off.
It's a movable feast.
I see. By the time I keep hoping I can get there.
Well, every time we schedule it, we get this dire snow warnings.
I know, and boy, and for the past 3 days here, we have had incredible winds. I mean, the trees are dancing and bending over. The top of the tree is 60, 70 feet tall. Looks to me like they're trying to kiss the ground. I'm not kidding.
We trees, had full trash barrels, big trash barrels blowing down the street.
Oh, yeah. Well, at least it hopefully no what do you call it?
No children were injured.
Well, it was just barrels and not just the trash.
No, not just, there was no trash that I saw. I mean, maybe it had all blown away by that time.
Yeah.
These were latched trash cans.
Thank goodness the neighborhood here seems to be pretty sturdy, that we haven't lost any things. But I'm telling you that the trees really, yesterday especially, bothered me. It was like I was watching some kind of special event. There are a couple of small apple trees outside of the window where I'm sitting, looking outside the living room, and I'm telling you, this apple tree was moving from, it's a double window, and it was going from the left side to the right side. I couldn't see it on the left, in the middle of the window, and then it was on the right side. It was, it's not it's only maybe 15 feet tall, but and some of
there were no apples on it at this time of year.
No, it's bare, but and over the last couple of weeks, it's been interesting. It's covered with snow, and then it's bare again. Covered with snow and bare again. Covered with ice, a couple times.
Right.
Interesting.
Well, speaking of storytelling, I'm pretty sure I saw you on the Speak Story event on Zoom this past Tuesday. I saw your name pop up there.
Yeah, I was there. Enjoyed it. I wrote to Adam, as I do after every one. So I said, I just thought it was great. And I wrote to him and said, I thought that if I opened up a book that said it was an encyclopedia and looked up storytelling and got to that page, there would be her picture.
Because very good.
She was just she's an example of a storyteller who just doesn't waste time and doesn't waste your attention. She just opens her mouth and tells a story. And you know what I mean? And she just continued. I thought to myself, I can't imagine any group of children, even if they didn't understand English, would have loved her. Because she just rolled it out there, and it was entertaining and interesting and funny, and I just loved her voice.
Well, we should say her name. That was Octavia Sexton.
Octavia Sexton, what a name! Yes,
and she was telling Appalachian stories, several Jack tales, but she was a hoot. I really enjoyed her, and she told some stories she had learned from kids
Oh,
because
yeah.
she works in schools and gets children to tell her stories and to
Great.
make up stories.
And
That was really interesting.
I like that. She was really,
Octavia Sexton.
right. I like the fact that she was so smooth. She didn't seem polished. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's the right word. She
Yeah,
didn't
she
see
was
she didn't seem like
a kitchen
professional,
table
polished, and
teller.
trying to show off to anybody. She just opened her mouth and told.
Yeah, and she comes from generations of storytellers. She
Yes,
was telling her family
absolutely. Yes,
traditions.
absolutely wonderful. I mean, I can't imagine her not working every single day if she wanted in schools. Because all we have to do is show that in a library at a teacher's meeting, and the teachers would be clawing at the front office to get her on their schedule.
I really enjoy it.
Yes, very much. And the lineup for the rest of the year, season 13, people should check speakstoryseries.com and look at that lineup. Boy, is it a good one.
Okay.
And they can get all the details and find out where to go and what time and cost and everything like that. And they can donate, or they can get season tickets. Um, join the people who love storytelling, like us.
All right.
So
Good season.
it's a lovely day out there. Sun is shining, and I don't know. You probably can't even see the sun. Oh, you have a window there, don't you?
Yeah, I can see the sun. The problem is if you go out there, you might get blown away.
Oh, I know. Terry told me it was very cold. I'm going to stay in today.
It's the wind. I don't mind the cold. I can bundle up for the cold, but I don't want to be blown away.
See, I'm the opposite. I don't mind the wind. I hate the cold.
So, do you want to start us out with a story?
I thought I would. Well, I told a little bit about St. Valentine's Day, and what I prepared for today are some. I did some looking into my papers and stuff, and I thought a few poems about love and Valentine's Day and stuff like that would be good. So I hope you'll enjoy these.
I'm sure I will.
I have a couple of poems. And the first one is about to me, it's one of the greatest love stories ever. And I became fascinated by this. I read a book about it, and then I once did a storytelling program about these two people because I thought it was so fascinating. I did it on Valentine's Day at this was in Arkansas, and a young woman, a good friend of mine, we performed a number of things together. Her name was Jackie. She and I, on this day, did a performance at one of the churches, and it was a free performance. We advertised it as a loving gift to the community, and we performed two things. We did one was what I'm going to do, this poem that I had put together, but the other one was love letters, which you and I have done at your performance space at the Unitarian Church in Hagerstown. So, but this is about the love story of Elizabeth Barrett and Robert Browning. Two lives begun 6 years apart, and lessons learned in similar ways. Formal school not suitable for him, forbidden to her. Those times were so dim. Loved and cherished by parents, free to explore with open minds, the world exciting and made so near by writings and books of many kinds. Both learned in speech and spoke many tongues, gained knowledge gleaned from foreign lands. Each wrote wise words from an early age, preparing to enter the worldly stage. His stature was less, But it mattered not, for praise from others meant little, compared to the notice of the only one who was more than hope could possess. Writing to tell how her words do please, words she has written mean so much more than others that seem hollow and miss what simply is true was never before. Perhaps an exchange of letters could be a sharing of thoughts, words penned by each, and minds so alike in poetry and praise may join in friendship in future days. And thus it began, a meeting arranged by a mutual admirer, to both a dear friend. The vigorous young man who admired from afar met the invalid woman who was already a star. Weak and sheltered, protected by love of parent and siblings who held her so dear, she met her admirer and over some time gained strength and resolve to conquer her fear. The courtship forbidden to end as it would, caused father to speak to her never again. But the love they shared grew each day. They became truly one and soon were away to a land where her health was better restored, a warm, sunny clime with the one she adored. They lived in joy and fame came to both. Their world of love soon blessed with a son. And friends did admire even works from the past, especially the sonnet written for one. Her illness returned and finally did claim her, and in his arms she rested her last. Her final word as she gazed at her love spoke volumes of her life now as she passed. Beautiful, she said, and in a moment we shall hear words written for him, her love so dear.
Thank you, Stash.
Yes, that might be one of the nicest things I ever wrote.
A good one.
And I worked hard on that because I wanted to make it special for that performance that we had done. And I have been touched for years by and I hope I'm saying the right way, the poem that she wrote, "How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways," and it comes and it's in a and it's comes from in a collection I think called Sonnet from the Portuguese, and I'm not positive of that. I didn't have a chance to research that again, but I think that's what the collection it's in. So, and I'm assuming you know that poem.
Yes. Well, I know. Yes, I don't have it memorized or anything
Oh,
like
okay.
that.
Well, I used to have it memorized, but I don't. But I'm going to read it now because I think it's so beautiful. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight for the ends of being an ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with a passion put to use in my old griefs. And with my childhood's faith, I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, and tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. Elizabeth Barrett Browning. The words in that poem are just so beautiful.
I can tell that you are in love.
I've been in love for a long time. I am in love, and I appreciate anyone who can write such beautiful words, especially if you read those carefully and understand what they mean. They touch on so many nice things, you know. I love the line in there where it says, "I love thee with the love I seem to lose with my lost saints." It reminds me of my childhood, being told about all the saints and the wonderful things they did, and how they gave up so much of their life to do wonderful works. And then as I got older and I lost them, as I think many people do, they slide away from you when you stop thinking about those people that influenced you as a child. Um, but the memories of something like that can touch your heart so much and make things feel so good. And it's okay if some of your heroes or heroines are gone from your life and you think differently of them as an adult, as long as you still can hold on to the memories that you had of how wonderful it was when you thought of those people, and when you were young. So she had such a great way with words to put love into such a wonderful thing. I also love about it because when I was in studying in school, I remember being told that there are things you can't do when you write poetry. You can't start every line with the same words, and you can't this and you can't that. You can't, teachers, especially to high school kids, will tell you what you cannot do if you want to become great and famous. And yet, if you read her poetry, every line begins with I, 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 I. I love thee, I love thee, I love thee. So, thanks to my not listening to my all of my teachers in school, because once I found this, I thought, what do they think that they don't know what they're talking about? This lady is famous.
Well, um, I find Elizabeth's family fascinating. That
Oh,
they made their money in from slave plantations, and clearly they had very strong ideas about what was proper for women and what was not, and they cultivated such intense literary and artistic work from their children, but
yeah,
they tried to keep an iron hand on them.
yeah, and because she was an invalid, because she was ill, they
Mm-hmm.
they were overprotective of her. They didn't want her to have a romance, a
Well, they
husband,
didn't.
anything.
Yeah, I mean, they published. They had her poetry bound, and the Battle of Marathon, her epic poem, but they only shared it within the family. They didn't want her to have any kind of public presence.
Yeah,
And
well,
of course, she rebelled against that
right,
eventually.
and
And she was an abolitionist
right.
in a family who
She and her
believed in
husband went
slavery.
to Italy. It was just their story is wonderful. It's a shame that she did. Well, of course, everybody dies, but it's a shame that it took her so long in her life to find so much love. And she had a great deal of love in her writing and that. So, but she spent the end of her life, the last years of her life, in the arms of her husband, and with a great deal of love and care, and um, died. I guess in a romantic idea that died the perfect way, you know, being held by her love. Though I'm not quite sure that would be the the happiest day for him, um, but would certainly be a better way than the end of life in other ways for people. So um, I that's one of those things that's always been on my mind. I remember um, there's a childhood story. Oh, what's her name? Now I won't remember it, but I do remember that in one of the childhood stories that I remember watching with my older daughter. The uncle of this young girl said that if he could choose a perfect way to end his life, if he were to be sick or something, he thought that lying in a field, a grassy field, with his head upon his niece's lap and listening to her voice would be the nicest way for him to pass from life. And I remember thinking that was a little bit weird at first, but as I grew older and older, it made sense that if you think you're going to pass away, you should pass away with your head resting on somebody's lap who cared for you and loved you. And I thought it was interesting that it would be in his case, it would be a niece.
Mm-hmm.
And
you have nieces, or have had nieces that you've been close to.
Oh yes, I've had. Yep, I have. My niece Lydia came to live with us when she was 1 year old, and she's still very precious to me. She's 8 years younger than I am, and we've been close all her life. I remember walking her to school when she was in kindergarten. And I was in 8th grade.
I have not met her, but she does sound like a wonderful person.
Oh, she is. She's very loving. She's one of the best people I've ever known. Very caring, very loving. She prays for me all the time.
I'm sure she cares about you a great deal.
Yeah, very nicely. So,
my time check says we're at about 20 minutes. Is that about what you have?
Yeah. Well, actually, no, I have 30.
Really?
29 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. And yes. So now, from your youth, don't you have a Valentine's Day story? Can't you think of one Valentine's Day that you spent as a young person?
Well, not that I remember making Valentine cards in school. Valentine's Day was not a big deal in my family. We did. Well, my dad always brought stuff to my mother for Valentine's Day. But the story that I wanted to start with just is a recent story. It's a Valentine's Day story.
Oh, okay.
But because it's a work in progress, as many of the things I tell on the radio are, I would be interested in your questions, Mr. Z. So
in
I'm
my
going to
questions,
tell this in-process story, and
okay.
And then you can draw things out of me that I haven't thought of. So this is a new story, and please ask me any questions that occur to you. One Valentine's Day, I went for a walk around the neighborhood with my beloved. It was a cold day and pretty windy, but not quite as windy as it had been, and the sun was shining, so I was looking forward to this outing. We were on the final loop and about to start for home when we came to Mahogany Avenue and saw 3 boys on bicycles zipping around, performing speed maneuvers and fancy turns as youngsters are wont to do. But they saw us coming round the bend and they took off, all 3 of them, single file, only because the biggest boy was the fastest and the other 2 followed according to the power of their much shorter legs. By the time we reached them at their own driveway, the bicycles had been abandoned on the lawn. The eldest boy was seated in a folding chair behind a table, positioned almost, but not quite, blocking the driveway. and the two younger ones standing within a couple feet of the table. The smallest boy was almost in front of the table, and his eyes were full of excitement, wide as saucers. The third boy was behind him and seemed to be hanging back a bit, but also completely focused on our arrival as we walked by the table. And I think the youngest was probably about 4, and the oldest might have been 9 or 10. Now, the outside temperature was just above freezing. It was about 33 degrees, but snow was falling steadily, though it wasn't yet sticking to the roadway. But it was clear from our first sighting of these children as we came around the bend that they were likely selling something or trying to, because there was a table and chair. Probably not selling lemonade in this weather, but maybe hot chocolate. Now, my husband hung back on the far side of the road when we got up to the driveway, waiting and listening to see what would happen next. But I went right up to the table and surveyed the scene. There were a few things on the table, but nothing indicating hot drinks for customers, and I couldn't figure out what purpose the few little dark colored plastic wrapped packages. There was a zipper pouch was one of them, and there were some others that were wrapped, and I couldn't figure out what that was about. Now, all 3 boys were on high alert and eager to engage. We saw you coming, and we want to know if you want your shoes cleaned. Well, I looked down at my sneakers. I laughed. I was confused. And then I saw this small handwritten, folded over corrugated cardboard, piece of cardboard. It was under the elbow of the young man seated at the table. And it had been lettered with a black magic marker. The words said, "Do you want your shoes cleaned?" ? And clearly a child had written these words. So I took a breath and I laughed again. I really was enjoying this encounter, but I was still baffled about how to proceed. So I did what is equivalent for me to scratching my head. I said, "Well, I'm wearing sneakers right now and it's snowing, so I don't think I want you to clean the shoes I have on at this moment. But if I come back this way later, I could try to bring you some shoes that need cleaning." And I paused with another thought. Oh, are you charging money for this community service? And all 3 boys answered in unison, some version of, "Oh, yes." So, how much are you charging? And again, as one voice, $5. Oh, from me. I was flummoxed. I had no money on my person just then. I was not in the habit of bringing cash on a 45-minute walk around the neighborhood. And even if I had brought some money with me, that dollar amount just quoted had thrown me for a loop. So I pondered my options, and I asked what seemed to me a relevant research question. "Have you had any customers so far?" And none of the boys looked at each other. Their eyes were still focused entirely on me. And the eldest, sitting at the table, said with a half beat of hesitation, "No, oh no, not yet." And I was aware of the snow coming down a bit harder and how cold it was. But we did ask at 2 houses. That neighbor, and he pointed across the street, where, because we walk this way generally a couple times a week, I had sometimes seen a male figure or 2 of different ages, an older guy and a younger guy, standing in the driveway talking to another male figure in a car. But I really did not know this particular street very well, so I didn't know anyone who actually lived there. And that neighbor, and the older boy pointed to the house just next to his own, where I had seen a couple times 2 other young children playing on the lawn, younger than these kids. But much more often, I'd seen tricycles and small riding toys scattered in the driveway and on the porch, and wondered, sometimes in the late evening, and wondered why the parents hadn't made the kids bring their toys inside. But I continued my research. And did they pay you to clean any shoes? No, not yet, the boy admitted, perhaps with a very small hint of regret at this admission. I paused for a second more before saying, well, good luck with your business, and maybe I'll see you later. And I gave them each a smile and turned back to my waiting walking partner on the other side of the road to continue our walk. Now, of course, he had heard the entire conversation, and I was not the least surprised at his first, albeit whispered words, $5? That's steep for a front yard children's stand. I didn't think it would be lemonade, but whatever it was going to be, I was expecting $1 at the most. How in the world did they get to $5? We waved and walked on to the end of Mahogany Avenue, where it dead ends into Eastwood Drive, just 4 houses and 4 driveways down the street from where we had stopped. And at the corner, I saw a thin, white, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper flapping in the wind, but very carefully and well taped to the pole of the street sign there. It was hard to read with the wind curling the edges and pressing it hard against the pole, but I did manage to uncurl this piece of paper enough to read. Line number 1 at the very top said, "No refunds after cleaning." The second line said, "Shoes cleaned." And the third line gave the address of that house where we had just stopped, 115 Mahogany Avenue. Hagerstown, Maryland, it said. I don't think there was a price listed, but I hardly noticed because I was totally charmed by this sign. Now, I did not make it back to the table that day, but the next day, I set out for a walk. The next time I went for a walk, I looked for these boys, and I was carrying a pair of very dirty boots all the way around the neighborhood because I had decided that I was willing to risk these boots with these kids because they were very old and dirty and they could use a good cleaning. And if they didn't make it back to me, well, it would not be a disaster. But the table was gone and the sign was gone, and no one came to the door when I rang the bell. Now, I'm disappointed, of course, and disheartened at the apparent casual attitude of the current generation of new business owners. What is the point of taking the time to market your business if you don't care enough to show up for work? Now, when I was coming up in business, I worked 9 to 5, sometimes till 6 in the evening. Granted, there wasn't snow on the ground, and it was July, and I was selling lemonade for 10 cents a cup. Now, I did have a little sidelines going. I had these little gray corduroy purses, corduroy fabric purses, as I called them. I called them purses. They closed with a button that I had sewn on myself and a length of crocheted, or it might have been braided yarn that I sewed on when I sewed on the button and stitched up the sides of these little corduroy purses. And I don't remember selling any of my offerings, but I sat there faithfully all day. And that's how I met Harry the dog. But that's a whole another story for another day. Now, my husband says we should try, he said back then that we should try again another time. And this year he said we should try again on Valentine's Day. but then I forgot about it till it was too late. And I wonder if they've moved on to a brick and mortar establishment by now, because it's been some time. But I did enjoy meeting those three boys.
And I have a couple questions.
No, I'm sure you do.
One of them is, how old were the three boys?
The youngest one was probably about 4,
All right.
and the eldest one was probably about 10.
Okay.
Maybe
4
9.
to 10. Okay. And just because I know you like comments on your stories, I wish you would describe them.
Oh.
Doesn't have to be much, but just give a picture, because I couldn't get a picture on mine. I got a picture of a 4-year-old, but I couldn't imagine whether he had to be, have a rope tied around his waist so he wouldn't get in trouble, or you know what I mean. If they were
when we first saw
babysitting.
them, they'd been on bikes, and they were totally engaged in the bicycle.
Right.
Riding.
Okay.
They were doing wheelies in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
And I thought they lived in the first house that the boy pointed to, where the other kids lived, because there were bikes on the lawn there too.
Yeah.
But and I had never seen these boys before, and I'd never even seen toys that I remembered in that yard. But as soon as the eldest one saw us first and made a beeline for their driveway, and the other two immediately, they rode as fast as they could so they would get to their driveway before we did, although we were not walking all that fast. They were bundled up, but I think all three had their coats open, which made sense because they'd been riding their bikes vigorously. But it was cold, and it was windy. So it was noticeable I noted that their jackets were unzipped. And they looked like they were in good shape. They were tall, probably for their age. I mean, I might be confused about their ages because I was not sure. I was trying to figure out by their height and the way they talked and the way they looked at me how old they were. But there could have been a few years discrepancy. But they were very polite, and there was no adult in sight. The front door was closed. It was cold, so it made sense that their front door would be closed. And they were relatively well dressed for kids who were just out on their bikes. They were wearing light colored shirts. Clear their parents did not expect them to be grubbing around in the dirt. And they were well spoken. So they looked like they were well cared for. And this is that street is pretty typical of the rest in this neighborhood, where kids are pretty well taken care of. You don't see a lot of kids off on their own, far from their houses. Somebody's keeping an eye on most of the kids in the neighborhood. But they were charming. I mean, they were nervous and very excited. And I think I was their first customer. Not that I became a customer, but it was fun.
Yeah. And what were the things that were on the table? When you started, you mentioned some things on the table.
Yes. So there was, right in front of me when I came up to the table, there was a black zipper bag that had a rubber band around it. So I'm guessing there were some shoe cleaning implements in that bag, in that little packet. And then there was another dark, like a plastic bag that had a rubber band around it in another part of the table. But it was not at all clear from what was on the table what they were doing there. Like I was expecting to see a crock pot or something with hot food in it, or a pencil and paper or something. And there was a sign, but the kids were not paying any attention to the sign. His elbow was on the sign as if he didn't even remember that it was there.
Right.
Once when he moved, I could read the sign, but it was not, they were not using print materials to market, except for the paper sign at the end of the road, which was a surprise because we hadn't seen anything coming from the other direction. And it could easily have blown away, although it was taped. It had a lot of tape on it to get it to stick to
The
the
way
pole.
the way you describe this is almost as if these three took over somebody else's thing. You know, it was almost as if they've been riding around. They spotted this. Where were the people? They were inside, probably because it was cold. And they said, "Oh, look, here comes somebody. Let's maybe work some money." And right away, I thought, my maybe that's why
Well,
they said $5 because that's all they could think of. You know.
I am, yeah. I mean, what I really want to end. I want to figure out what to add to the story and what else people would like to hear about this story. But it was just such a. I felt like I was dropped down in the middle of a TV show.
Yeah.
Something.
Well, I like the idea of them having come I just it fascinated me that maybe they were riding around and they saw this table and the people had taken a break or had forgotten to come out or had given up.
Right.
And they said, "Well, maybe we can make some money." You know?
I think I might use that.
Yeah,
That sounds good.
yeah, because it does sound bizarre for
Yeah.
$5. You know, especially if the little kid gave the answer for the money.
Well, if he was, yeah, all three of them were on board. They had clearly discussed it and they
Right.
were in agreement. They were
Right.
not
Oh,
going
that
to
would be good.
Uh,
Well, that's good. Yeah,
It was a good walk.
that was great. You know, that's lovely. Well, I'm not sure about the time. I think we've been on for about, I think about 48 minutes.
Wow. I'm astonished. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's true because I had started my timer and it says right now, it says 47 minutes and 48 minutes, 47,
Well, yeah, if
45
I look
seconds.
at the actual clock, because we started just after
After 10.
10, so
Yeah.
that it makes
Right.
sense. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would like to read one more poem.
Okay.
Okay. This I wrote while sitting in a classroom with a group of sixth graders who were working away on a science project, and I was thinking about romance. Okay. On soft breezes, your name comes, or perhaps it's just from my mind, and my heart beats more quickly, and I think of what I'll find when I travel to respond and say, I love you so. How could I help but answer and whisper that I care and say, I'm your love? And say, I'm yours, my love, because you are so fair. Your touch means more than words can tell. You thrill me each time I sense you being there. And my wonder goes on at the sight of you. My delight in knowing my love is true heightens each moment I come to know you are my desire, my partner, my friend, ever more and more as we grow on soft breezes.
Oh.
And when I finished writing that, I was very pleased with myself. I thought, gee, that came out really nice, you know. And I looked up, and this was a group of sixth grade boys working on a project. And one of the boys said, are you taking notes on us? And I said, oh, no, I was just writing a little message. And another one said, it looks like you are proud of yourself. And I closed my notebook and said, enough about me. Let's see how you're doing in science. because I genuinely did not want any of those boys to see what I'd written. You know, I don't know. I think for a minute there, I was afraid my my manly science teacher position would be threatened. I couldn't imagine these bozos enjoying a love poem.
And they were probably worrying that you were writing a note to the headmaster or the principal.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because but it was interesting.
A message for Garcia.
Right, right. Anyway,
Oh my.
I'm very proud of that poem because my sweet wife, Terry Lee, loved it when I gave it to her. And it was for Valentine's Day.
You've been listening to the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org. We are independent community radio broadcasting from Bolivar, West Virginia, Hagerstown, Maryland, and Martinsburg, West Virginia. And now we're closing out this week's show. We've been offering you, our listeners, a window into the world of storytelling by traditional and non-traditional tellers, encouraging our listening community to share, preserve, and expand all of our stories. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for John Case and,
well, the last man standing from the Grateful Dead, Bobby Weir.
Whoa.
I was about to say blues. I'm glad I didn't say that.
No, we're on a. I found another repository of all their stuff. It's a little easier to pick out songs from. The main repository, you had to play the whole album half the time. But I mean the whole concert.
Yeah.
So now there's some of his songs that I just were classic. He does some of the Dylan songs he does better than Bob, I think.
Yeah.
Or as good anyway. And he does a lot of he turned the folk song Shenandoah into a beautiful tune called Only a River.
That's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
I was singing that to myself yesterday.
Anyway.
Wow.
Okay. But let me turn off the recording here for a second.